There are clients who will fly across the world and pay a lot of money to see my husband, Kelly Starrett, for low back pain. I think people would be surprised to learn that the things that he does with them are teach them how to breathe, prescribes walking, and he teaches them how to mobilize their hips and encourages them to sit on the floor. The one mobilization to rule them all.
Juliet Starrett is a lifelong athlete, New York Times bestselling author, former attorney, and one of the top wellness experts in the world. Juliet and her husband, Kelly Starrett, are pioneers in mobility training, literally creating the mobility WOD that has impacted the lives of millions of people. And they are the creators of the Ready State, getting you ready for all areas of fitness in your life. Your book, Built to Move, literally sits on the arm of my couch.
Yes.
Forever. It's just sitting there. It's a staple in my living room. I see this book every day, and it's like this subtle reminder to move, to give my body certain inputs. And it's been a game changer for myself and many people. And of course, there were already a lot of good things I was doing, but it just really helped to cement some things and also to add in some different things that I've implemented now in my life. And we're going to talk about all those things. But I want to talk about how we got here, because we're experiencing, and this isn't talked about enough, epidemic levels of pain, epidemic levels of dysfunction, and an inability to move. Like, we're losing the ability to do a lot of basic movements. What is going on? Why is this happening to us as a species?
Well, I think it's, like most things, multifactorial, but I would go back to a subject I'm particularly interested now and go all the way back to kids. And I know this is a subject that's near and dear to your heart. In Eat Smarter Family Cookbook, I feel like you talk about a lot of the data around this. But I mean, the reality is our kids aren't moving. And they're not doing traditional physical education in schools. I think kids and adults alike are prone to really seriously sedentary lifestyles these days. And the reality is that if we don't move our bodies in a lot of different ways, a lot throughout the day, the result actually is pain and stiffness and general discomfort with moving. And then it becomes like, it's sort of, it becomes a self-feeding situation where we stop moving and then it doesn't feel good to move. And, I don't have the exact data at my hands, but you and I have talked about low back pain. Low back pain is a huge problem across this country. And I mean, we probably get just into the Ready State 2 or 3 emails a day with people suffering from chronic low back pain for a variety of reasons. And, the biggest issue is that anytime people experience pain, or a lot of times when people experience pain, it pulls them out of the ability to move their bodies. And that has a lot of downstream impacts. I mean, one of the biggest downstream impacts is that for most of us, what we like to do, like I always like to say that human beings do 2 things together. We eat together and we move together. And when and if people are in pain, you take out the move together piece, then all of a sudden we're ripped out of our training community or our pickleball community or the community with whom we go for a walk on the weekend. And so it has this huge downstream mental health impact. And, and I think, we're struggling at this point to figure out how we can, find reasonable and consistent ways to help people move their bodies more when we live in an environment that is encouraging us not to move. We have, technology creep. All of our environments are, have set up for us to not move and be on devices or computers all day long. And the downstream impact is we're in a lot of pain. We don't feel good in our bodies. It encourages us not to move. And then we're taken out of our communities. And then it further impacts our mental health.
Oh my gosh. That's something that, again, I don't think we think about, and how we lose community when we experience, an injury or something like that, a setback. And the community helps us to get well.
Yes.
right? Not let alone the movement, but the community aspect.
Yeah. So when we owned a gym, as you know, for almost 20 years, and we joke around that we feel like we became specialists in 3-limbed training. Because of course, in that many years, you have people who have injuries or, they fall on their skateboard. I mean, you name it, we had every type of injury, joint replacements, catastrophic injuries, ACL tears. I mean, every injury you can think of under the sun, our members had. And what we would always tell them is just show up anyway. We will find a way to help you move your body in ways that will protect your surgery if you've just had surgery, or, work around pain if you're having pain. But, we really felt like the worst case scenario when our members would get injured was for them to stop coming. And so we actually became experts at it. Like Kelly and I could write 50 workouts for someone to do with 3 limbs today, right? And our thinking was, I think, really valuable. I think it helped people get beyond. I think it helped people recover faster because they stayed connected to their community. I think it helped them recover faster because, as you know, movement is medicine. Movement is the best way to, flush out swelling and all the attendant things that come with surgery. And so, we always just encourage people to keep on moving as in pain-free ranges. Of course, we weren't encouraging people to go out of pain-free ranges, but keep moving in pain-free ranges.
Now, here's one of the biggest takeaways that I want everybody to have from today. We now have sound data on this. You guys knew this long before the peer-reviewed community, right? The academics published the data, but we know that movement helps us to heal faster.
Yes. And thank you for saying that. This is a bit of a non sequitur, but, Kelly and I have been suggesting that people don't sit as much starting back in 2010. And now the research is starting to catch up with that, which is great news, right? You don't want the opposite to happen. You don't want to be espousing some idea and then have the research come out and show you that you were totally wrong and have to walk that back. But to me, it made such obvious sense to us. And I think because we were owning a gym, and then we also owned a physical therapy clinic. And so we were seeing people come in the door. And the reason we started talking about not sitting so much is that we started to make this connection between seeing a lot of people who were literally living their lives in this position that you and I are sitting, where all their joints are at 90-degree angles for 10, 12, 16 hours a day. And then confused as to why when they got up to go for a quick run, their Achilles tore off their body, or that they had low back pain or a myriad of other injuries. And so for us, because we were able to see so many patients in a clinical setting, we were able to make that connection and just say, hey, maybe this environment that we've created where we're sitting all the time is not conducive to having bodies that are supposed to do what bodies are supposed to do. I mean, we haven't evolved as humans to the point where we can sit like this and not have it have a negative impact. And so, that's where we are. And so fortunately, we started talking about this in 2010. And fortunately, since then, there have been massive numbers of peer-reviewed studies that have come out to support that it's not great to be sitting all the time, both from a pain standpoint, but also just from a movement standpoint.
Yeah. So another big takeaway is the human body is incredibly adaptable. It adapts to the environment. It adapts to the conditions you place on it. And so we become world-class chair sitters.
Exactly.
And you try to do something else outside of that.
Right.
Surprise.
Yeah, surprise.
Got your Achilles.
Yeah, exactly. Got your Achilles, got your ACL.
Your nose.
Yeah, exactly. And so, exactly. I mean, we are adaptability machines. And if we practice sitting 12, 14, 16 hours a day, and we don't ever take our joints through their full ranges of motion, then we can't be surprised when we have downstream impacts of that. Now, what I will say is, we sometimes have been put into this box of like, you guys are against sitting, or we've been at the airport and had people come up to us and be like, I got you guys sitting. And that's really not what we've tried to say at all. And then we also appreciate that oftentimes sitting isn't a choice in our world. We have to sit on planes. There's people who have jobs that require them to sit. But I think even just bringing some mindfulness
Yeah.
to the idea that we weren't meant to be in this position all the time. Yeah. I always like to think to myself, my next position is my best position when I'm working. And so, if you had a little like all day time-lapse camera following me throughout my workday, for example, you'd see that I assume 50 different positions. I sit on the floor, I stand, I fidget, I swing my bar on swing my foot on something called a fidget bar. I stand on a balance board. I take walking meetings. I'm trying to always be in my next position because I feel like that's the best way to give my own body the input it needs to sort of retain some of those native capabilities.
Yeah. And speaking, that's a great term, native capabilities, and things that we really evolved doing that are a big part of what our genes expect, right? Because there's a certain form of sitting that humans have been doing forever, thousands and thousands of years. Toilets, chairs, all these things are relatively newer inventions. And humans, of course, we find a comfy place to sit. Maybe you sit on a log, maybe you sit on a nice little flat stone, but we've been sitting on the ground since the beginning, right? And this is one of the things you talk about. You don't just talk about not sitting. It's just, hey, how about we get this input of sitting on the ground more often? And that's one of the things, the real big changes, because I was already dabbling in that. I'd sit on the ground from time to time. But now it's just like when I come into my living room, that's where I sit. I sit on the ground. My wife has her comfy place on the couch. I'm sitting on the ground sometimes, and I'll come up and snuggle with her a little bit. But she knows,
right? Because you're not
I'm going
weird.
to start to right. She knows that I'm going to start to fidget after a little while. I'm going to want to, because your body starts to crave sitting on the ground, ironically. And here's the thing. When you're sitting on the ground, you can change the way you're sitting. And that was one of the coolest things about Built to Move, is that you guys shared these different inputs, like the 90-90 sitting and like just sitting with one leg extended outwards, and like, because your body will tell you. But the other thing is, and that was a big revelation, we become conditioned. We basically create like a whole body callus with comfort, right? Because the discomfort from sitting is supposed to be a cue. It's supposed to be a cue to move our position. But if you're sitting in a lazy boy, all right, it's called lazy boy you don't get that cue.
Nope.
So
yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I have to go back to what you said at the very beginning, that our hope in writing that book was that it would do exactly what you've said, which is sit on your coffee table or on the side of your couch and kind of just be the book where every so often you go back, maybe you retest yourself on one of the things. You're like, oh, treat it like an at-home physical. You're like, let's see where I'm at. Like, have I, maybe I haven't been sitting on the floor as much as I should have lately. Maybe I should run a couple tests and see how I feel. Try the sit and rise test. Just run myself through a few of the tests. I mean, that was our goal. So the fact that you are using the book that way, first of all, makes me so happy. On to sitting on the floor. I mean, I know you share a fandom with Katie Bowman, as we do. I know you've had her on the podcast multiple times. And, Kelly and I really have to give her a lot of credit for really teaching us the value of sitting on the floor and all of the different positions in which you can sit on the floor. But for me, I mean, look, I think we've told you this before. What we do in our day job is try to help people with their mobility, and it's hard to get people to care about mobility. If you are a busy person and you have a laundry list of health things you need to do, for 90% of people, taking care of your mobility is usually going to be the thing that gets crossed off the list if you run out of time. And we appreciate that that's the reality. It's not fun. It kind of hurts to, put a ball into the parts of your body that hurt a lot. But what is easy to do is sit on the floor. And that's why I love it as a mobility practice, or just a practice, if you want to think about it that way. The data shows that we're all watching 3 hours of television a day. So we have time to sit on the floor. And in those 3 hours, or if you're a 2-hour kind of person, sit on the floor for half an hour and then sit on the couch for 90 minutes. But what I love about it is it feels so good. I think for anyone who suffered with low back pain, like I know you have, Shawn, it really can make a huge difference in how your low back feels, how mobile your hips are. And then it just does that wonderful thing of giving you this opportunity to practice getting up and down off the ground, which I think we've all learned is so important, especially as we age. So I just cannot emphasize how awesome trying to add in the practice of sitting on the ground for 30 minutes a day, whether that's at night when you watch TV the way you do it. I try to sprinkle it into my workday because I'm often on my computer. So I try to get in, I'm at my standing desk and then I sit at my coffee table for a little while. But man, I mean, sitting on the ground for 30 minutes a day is the way.
That was a Mandalorian bar right there. All right. It is the way.
It is the way.
You mentioned, the low back stuff. That's what got me into this field in the first place. I was 20 years old and diagnosed with severe degeneration of L4, L5S1. They're both herniated. And I was just given standard of care, right? Here's some NSAIDs, here's some different drugs for you to enjoy. And here's a prescription for sitting. Here's a prescription for bed rest. Here's a prescription to not move. Literally wrote to give to my job, right? Don't do anything, just sit. And so I sat for 2 years. And
How'd that go?
Everything. I did everything. Oh, first of all, let's talk about my couch. Let's talk about how I went from my little love seat, my little cheap ass little love seat that I had in Ferguson, Missouri. If you got a couch you can carry by yourself, it's not a couch, right? It's just an ouch.
Yes.
It's an ouch. Oh. The C isn't even on there.
Yep.
Over time, me sitting there, my ass broke through the wood, all right? And when I met my wife, when I met Ann, she came to my house. I had a pillow under that cushion to keep it level, all right? So this is, but this
and was
after,
she like, what are you doing with this couch? I mean, did she immediately call you out on it?
I'm saying, I don't know why she messed with me, to be honest. But, at this point, I transformed my health. She met me at the gym. She met me working at the university gym. But for those 2 years, I just, not only did my spine atrophy, but everything else, all and this is the big thing. Literally the big thing was that I gained all this weight because I still had the same input of nutrition, but now I'm not moving at all. And so that was really my catalyst for getting into this field. Was the big solution for me was smart movement. It was smart movement, changing what I'm making my tissues out of course, and giving my body real recovery, because I wasn't sleeping well, because I wasn't doing anything. I'm just staring at the screen, playing video games, watching movies all day, and doing everything that I can to not stand up because it was painful.
Yeah.
It was painful to stand up. And what you've done, and I just want to recap this, you guys became experts at helping people to, regardless of what's going on, to be able to do something.
Yeah.
Because truly, if you don't move it, you lose it.
So one point I want to make here is, first of all, how crazy is it that that was the standard of care? I mean, Thank God, I think even in a more traditional medical environment now, that would not be the advice that you would get. I mean, maybe in some places, but hopefully we've moved beyond that. But what I love to tell people is there are clients who will fly across the world and pay a lot of money to see my husband, Kelly Starrett, for low back pain. And I think people would be surprised to learn that the things that he does with them are teach them how to breathe. He prescribes walking, and he teaches them how to mobilize their hips and encourages them to sit on the floor. And so, I think maybe people would think that, because he's Kelly Starrett, he's going to clap his hands together and do some kind of super secret, amazing thing that only Kelly Starrett can do. But he doesn't. It's this basic program of teaching people how to breathe, walking more, and learning how to mobilize their hips that are the base of his low back program. And those are simple things. Those are simple things you can do without flying across the country and paying Kelly Starrett lots of money. Anybody can do those things.
Yeah, I love that. And let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about it's all in the hips. It's all in the hips. That's from Happy Gilmore. Apparently, there's another one coming. They're making a new Happy Gilmore. Way. Yeah, apparently. That's the word on the street. And, he's big with the cameos, by the way. So he's got some great people who are going to be in the film. But anyways, it's all in the hips. One of the things that I do here, even at the studio, I got my little office over here, And, obviously when I'm doing solo shows, I'm standing. All right. There's my standing set right over there.
I know.
But
I
also,
see it and I'm like, I see you. I see you standing there.
And I've been doing this since day one of the Model Health Show.
Yeah.
Day one, 11 years ago, St. Louis, Missouri, iHeartRadio, I was standing. All right.
Well, why do you think that's, I mean, let me ask you, why were you doing that? Was it because you had this experience with low back pain and you'd learned that, what do you think, what was the reason for that? Why did you choose to do that?
There is some intuition there for sure. And for me, and let me tell you, the intuition part was me being able to emote, to speak fully, right? Was standing, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to be mobile. I wanted to be able to fully express myself from a power position. But also the study, research, coming across people like you, like Kelly, and just learning how I can get this input, because I'm about to be filming. Maybe it might be 3 hours. And what if I can spend some of this time in a different position than just sitting, right? So that was a big part of it. And here, again, in my office, rather than, sitting on the floor per se, I'll kneel I've got the table is smaller. And so I'll get into like a one knee, get on one knee, like high school football practice, right? Take a knee.
Yeah, just take a knee and do your work like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just were hosting a course at our office, and we had 25 participants. And for 2 days, they were mostly sitting on the floor. But for a lot of the participants, actually, they said at the end that the most difficult part of the weekend was actually sitting on the floor for that many hours in a row, because we just don't practice it very often. And by contrast, we had a coach who'd flown in for the course from Tokyo, and he's part of a culture where they practice sitting on the floor all the time in a myriad ways. Mm-hmm. And he actually could sit and kneel on a hard concrete floor all day and was comfortable. Mm-hmm. And we were all just in awe of him. But what I loved about it was realizing this old adage that practice makes permanent. We can all get there. We can get to the point where we can sit on a hard concrete floor for half an hour and we're not dying. And I think we can get there by just doing this simple practice of, thinking about changing our positions and focusing on sitting on the floor.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about that hip mobility, right? So with that kneeling position, for example, would that be something that can give me a little bit of input for my hips?
Yes. So what that is akin to, which is a stretch I know that that we're famous for, which is the couch. We call it the couch stretch. Although to correctly do the couch stretch, you do it against the wall. But effectively what you're doing in that sort of football kneeling position is you're putting your hip into extension, which is the opposite of what we're doing right now, which is keeping our hips in flexion. And in this flex position is how our hips are spending most of their days and nights, because again, most of us are sitting and commuting and doing all these things. And so what we see in our athletes, and going all the way down to youth athletes, we find it really shocking is how much hip extension people are missing, because we are spending so much time in a flex position. So, one of the questions that makes Kelly have fire fly out of his ears is people always want to know. They say, "Hey, Kelly, what's the one mobilization I should do?" Yeah. And he can't answer that question because he's like, the human body is the most complex system in the known universe. And I can't just reduce my lifetime of work to this one move. But I would say that if you are going to do one mobilization to rule them all, it's the couch stretch, because to me, it's the antidote to the sort of ills of modern living, which is sitting and not moving enough. And it's the thing we notice people are missing the most. Depending on people's backgrounds and histories, people sometimes have, missing shoulder and ankle mobility and other issues, but hip extension seems to be universal. And the way to test it is to actually do the couch stretch. You can learn a lot about where you are from a hip extension standpoint. And the other, we also really recommend the couch stretch to youth athletes, because, what happens to kids is that they, as you know from having kids, is that they have, they don't just grow. I mean, they do grow slowly, but then they have these big growth spurts. And all of a sudden, all of their muscles and tendons and ligaments and every part of their body is on tension because they've grown quickly. And one of the biggest things we see is a real struggle to do the couch test, couch stretch in youth athletes. And it's the number one, if a kid in our neighborhood is injured and comes over to see us, 9 times out of 10, they have little to no hip extension. It is either causing pain or limiting their performance, more often, limiting their performance. And again, it's something you can do 5 minutes aside every day in front of your couch on a wall. I see you guys have your mobility set up out here. The couch stretch is the way.
It was so cool because you said one mobility to rule them all. That's a Lord of the Rings reference right there, right?
It's one of my favorite books of all time.
Last night, I was watching Rings of Power on Amazon.
I'm watching that
sitting
too.
on the floor.
Yes, I'm fist bumping you from afar over here.
From afar.
I've been watching that show too, sitting on the floor in my living room.
Apparently, it's the most expensive show ever created.
Well, I mean, can you see it has like 17 plot lines? And even if you watch it straight through, it's kind of hard. Oh, you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about this plot line. And there's that plot line. But yeah. So, I mean, Lord of the Rings is one of the only book series I've read more than once in my life.
Wow,
I've read single books more than once, but I read The Lord of the Rings first, when I was about your son's age, and then again in my 20s, and then again in my early 40s. So I love Lord of the Rings.
That's awesome. That's powerful. See, I knew we were besties. All right.
Seriously,
okay.
I'm telling you.
Now, with this being said, that floor sitting also comes with a very, very powerful buy-in for people, which is it's one of the things that is most noted, again, strongly associated with longevity. And this particular study, it made the rounds. I was one of the first people, as soon as it was published, shouting this from the rooftops, shouting it from Mordor. All right. This was published in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology. And the title of the study is Ability to Sit and Rise from the Floor as a Predictor of All-Cause Mortality. Again, this is one of the things most associated with how long you're going to live. The ability to get down and get up from the floor.
Yep. Yeah. So in our book, we call this a sit and rise test, and we open our book with this for a reason. And that is because, again, we appreciate and understand lives are crazy, and your ability to move and your mechanics and mobility often are the thing that get crossed off the list. And we respect that. But it becomes more and more important as we age, because as you know, the leading cause of death over age 65 in an injury-related cause of death over age 65 is falls. And anybody who has an older person in their life who's fallen knows that, it is a serious issue. And often people only live 2 years after a major fall if they fall over 65 years old. And there's a variety of reasons for that. But, loss of balance, lack of strength, lack of mobility. There's a lot of reasons that are, that's an issue. Falls are an issue. But one of the best ways to make sure you don't become one of those statistics is to practice getting up and down off the floor. It's a critical skill, and it really is a skill that you see the 90-year-olds who are crushing it are able to do. And let me tell you how to do the test if you're listening to this. You stand in a comfortable place, in a place where if you fall backwards a little bit, you have a safe place to land. So we like to do it on our living room floor because we have a pretty thick, comfortable carpet there. But you cross your legs, you cross your ankles, and you under control try to lower yourself to the ground without putting a knee or hand on the ground, and then do the reverse, which is from a cross-legged position. You stand back up without putting a knee or hand on the ground. And they scored it out of 10 points, and anything over an 8 out of 10 was good. You were good. And an 8 out of 10 means you could actually put one knee and one hand down, a couple points of contact, which is, I think, when we first started talking about the test, we didn't emphasize enough. Your all-cause mortality is only increased if you get less than an 8 out of 10. So we had a lot of people coming and saying, oh my God, I'm so close. I can do it with one hand, or I can do it with one knee. Well, that's fine. And, the goal is to do it without a hand or a knee. But again, we should just call this episode like the wonders of sitting on the floor, because, one of the reasons that we are fans of sitting on the floor is that it does force you to do this thing that we've really lost as humans, which is the ability to get up and down off the ground. forces you to have a little bit of strength, a little bit of mobility. It helps you practice your balance. And all of those things are going to help you be a more durable person as you age, which for me is really the goal, is how to be a durable, fall-proof human as I age. Because the last thing I want to do is have some kind of fall and then have that be the end. Just because I didn't practice getting up off the ground and kind of keeping an eye on my balance and mobility, at this age, I'm 50. And the way to get better at this test is to do the test, which is to lower yourself to the ground once or twice a day, and then practice sitting on the floor. Because what this test is really sort of is showing is whether or not you have hip range of motion. And by the way, you don't have to have full hip range of motion to be able to do this test. I have super tight hips. Unlike my husband, who's built like Gumby, I struggle more. I have tight hips. I really have to work on it. And when we first started writing this book, and when I first read the study, I think I probably read it, 7 years ago when it first came out like you did, I couldn't do the test. It actually took some real attention to doing the couch stretch on the regular, sitting on the floor and practicing getting up and down before I was able to comfortably do it.
Mentioning how dangerous it is in, quote, senior years for somebody to experience a fall, the number one determinant of survivability of a fall is your level of fitness coming into the fall. All right. That's the number one determinant. And again, we've got data on this. It seems logical, but truly, if we are active, if we are strength training regularly, if we're sitting on the floor, if we are adaptable and you fall, you just get up.
Exactly.
But again, we have today, especially in we'll say our, I don't even want to say civilized. Well, in our society, in our modern society, we are becoming obviously very sedentary, right? But we're also, especially as time goes on, each decade, we're just doing less and less. We're becoming far less mobile, far less active. But you see other cultures around the world where you mentioned somebody being in their 90s and crushing it, where it's just a part of the culture to continue to move. And you see dramatically lower rates of all manner of loss of dysfunction, but also survivability of falls and things like that. You just don't see these dramatic outcomes, right? But here's the key. We're taking away inputs. And what I mean by that is once we get to a certain age, we stop playing,
Yes. I mean, we are obsessed with this topic. So you're just, wind me up on this. I'm so excited. So coincidentally, Kelly and I had this weird occasion where we were actually looking back at old CrossFit, early CrossFit programming and training. Like I'm talking 2003 to 2005. And, love it or hate it, people have their very strong feelings about CrossFit, but early CrossFit and the early CrossFit philosophy was all about actually training in the gym so that you could go do a sport. And that idea really got lost when CrossFit became a competitive sport and, people were spending so much time in the gym. And I think we're having a similar situation where, I think it's amazing that we have this access to so much information now about our health and longevity. It's hot. Everybody's talking about it. People are spending millions and millions of dollars to try to figure out if they can just live a little bit longer. And I think there's a lot of really cool people doing very innovative and cool work in technology and, blood work like we've talked about, and so many areas to try to sort of improve the human condition. But what I worry about a little bit is that in some ways, it feels like it's become so prescriptive and so clinical that like we've forgotten that we're supposed to have fun and play as humans. And, if our days just look like we've got to wake up and, have our one shot of espresso and journal and make sure we sit in our infrared sauna and get 45 minutes of sunlight and then make sure we eat the perfect macro controlled meal. And then we go and, 3 days a week we strength train and 3 days a week we do high intensity interval training. And then we take exactly the right package of supplements. And, we do all the things that we're being told to do. And again, some of those things may or may not help us with our longevity. I think the jury's out. I think we're kind of in this sort of like brave new world. But what I can tell you, I see it doing in a lot of the people I know who are really focused on this is they don't play anymore. And man, it's so important as humans that we connect with one another through play. And it's important for our mental health. And I think it's important. It's also, even some of these things we're talking about, we're sitting on the floor, we're doing the couch stretch. Well, another way to take our joints through full range of motion is by playing, by doing different sports, by, joining a pickleball league or learning how to mountain bike or hiking on uneven surfaces or, playing basketball. I mean, there's 1,000 ways that we can play, but I do really feel like we've lost that narrative in this sort of prescriptive world of longevity. And, we got to bring that back into the mix. And my strategy as a parent, and I suspect it is your strategy as a parent, is to model behaviors I want my kids to do. And one of those is playing. And so we have peppered our household always. If you come over to our house, we have frisbees and skateboards and balance boards and a slack line in the backyard. And Kelly has this whole quiver of bows and arrows. And we have a pool. And when our kids were little, we had a trampoline. And, we actually prescribe the people who come work with us for coaching to get out of the gym and go pick up a sport or take a hike or be outside or play. Because I think it's so important for our psyches as humans and such an important way to connect. And we kind of forgot about it.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing that because, it's not just the physical activity, it's the psychological aspect of it as well. And really all of our actions are influenced by our psychology in the first place. It's like the first ingredient. And so, there's this wise quote that says, we don't stop playing because we get old. We get old because we stop playing.
Yes, here.
Yeah.
Yes, it's so important. I think we've got to get people outdoors and connecting with other humans and moving together. And look, I think you're like me. I love the gym. Like I'm a gym rat. I started lifting weights when I was in junior high and, was a professional athlete. And, I've spent a lifetime in the gym. I like the gym and I think the gym is fun. But I don't know if it's as fun as the mountain bike club I created with my friends where we connect every Saturday and go ride up some mountain and, see beautiful scenery and laugh and tell jokes and make connections. Like, there's just something about getting outside and playing with others that it's different than the gym.
Yeah. They based a movie around that statement, by the way. I think the movie's called Tag, but it has the guy who plays Hawkeye in Marvel, Jeremy Renner.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And
He's
so
awesome.
basically this group of friends is playing a game of endless tag since they were children. All right. And so like you're it basically. And so, but one of them is like a master of this. Like he's the one that never gets it. He never gets tagged. And
is that the Jeremy Renner character?
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, of course. He's he's John Wick of tag.
Yeah.
Right. But with that being said, these games, and I'm just thinking about, there was something sent home with my son from his school that's got all the events that are coming up at the school, and they got pictures of the kids. And there's one where the kids are like running out of a building. They're just in so much joy. Like there's running activity, and I'm just looking at. There's probably 10 kids you could see, and then there's some like a kind of off in the background, but their mouths are open. There's joy on their face, and I'm just thinking about when they will stop doing that. When will they stop doing that? Yeah. Because what they're doing, that activity of just moving fast, for example, we need that. Once you stop moving fast, right, that can be something that is really tied to aging. It's like a quote slowing down process. Yep. But there's a moment usually that happens when we stop moving fast. We stop taking risk, because even moving fast, you could fall, you could, you can get injured, whatever, but you can also have a load of fun. But here's the thing, you're much more acclimated to moving fast if you keep moving fast.
Right. It's interesting you say that because my mom is turning 80 this year, and I just noticed that she started walking a lot slower. And then I'm wondering if that study that you're referencing is the same one that just crossed my eye, but it basically said that often slow walking is a precursor to dementia as we age. And so I said to my mom, I was like, Mom, you got to make sure you're walking faster. And so she actually has been reporting to me that, she goes on her weekly hikes, and she's like, I'm actually making a conscious decision to make sure that I'm walking faster, that I'm not being so careful not to fall, that I'm just she's like really trying not to adopt this slow walking. The other study that crossed my eye just in the past week was a study that showed that in men, which, as we've talked about, most of the studies are in men, just being stiff in the body is correlated with living less long. And I thought that was interesting because, again, one of the things we've been trying to do for so many years is just help people, like we like to say, de-stiffify, right? And I think everybody experiences it, just living life and raising kids and working a crazy job, you just do start to feel as we age, I think we all start to feel our bodies getting more and more stiff. And the goal ultimately is to try to become and try to put a little input into the body so that we stay as supple as possible. And look, we're realistic, like aging is real. We're, maybe not going to be as supple as we were when we were 12, but it is possible to regain that. And, one of the things that we like to tell everybody is, unlike age-related bone loss and muscle loss, which, to a certain extent is inevitable. Obviously, we can do a lot to slow that down, but you don't have to actually lose your mobility. Your mobility is something that you can keep and maintain until the day you die. And it's something that you can get back if you've lost. And so it's this sort of like beacon in this, in this, aging department that is really something we can make a big difference on. But I mean, I don't even know why I started talking about being supple. I mean, how can we bottle that experience that kids are having when they're playing like that? Yeah. And bring it to, it's like if we could have a pill and give it to adults, that experience they're having that you saw in that photo that was captured. But I think part of it is just reintroducing play into our lives and prioritizing that and making that as much of a priority as our 2 days a week of strength training and 2 days a week of high intensity interval training.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a culture where it's like playtime's over. Right. So I'm thinking now, okay, got another movie reference, The Last Dragon.
Oh, I didn't see that.
So this is iconic. This is Barry Gordy produced. All right. It's a karate kung fu flick from like the 80s, and Bruce Leroy is the main character. And I believe it's probably the late 80s when it came out. But anyways, when he's facing off against the villain in the film, Shawn. All right. He's like, playtime's over, boy. Right. So because Bruce Leroy's, he's got this like vitality, this spirit of play and practice. But of course, he does take it serious because he wants to get the glow. He wants to become a master. But, in our culture, we have this idea like it's time to stop playing and to get serious. Right. And there's this teacher. And my mother-in-law is probably listening right now. It's a meditation teacher from back in the day. He said that seriousness is a sickness. Yeah. Seriousness is a sickness. And of course, there's a time and a place for us to be serious. Absolutely. But when we make that habitual, we stop enjoying life in the moment and all the cascade of opportunities there and being more playful. And these things tend to be, again, associated with vitality and youth, right? But these things are also a choice. And so I want to encourage us, wherever we are, to pick up some of these things and start to add them in intentionally, right? A little bit of play, but also moving fast. And there's so many ways to go about this. This doesn't have to be by you just, okay, I'm going to Forrest Gump this. And I'm just going to start running outside, right? No. It's what's appropriate for you. This might be grabbing a battle rope and doing a little bit with the battle rope. This might be a ski erg. This might be hopping on a stationary bike. This might be jumping rope, but find something where you can get a fast input to tell your body, I want to go fast. Yeah. All right. I'm the fast and the furious.
I think it's so important too to remind everybody that, I mean, you and I come from physical culture. We love to train, that's sort of where we are professionally, but there's so many ways to play also that aren't physical. And one example I'll give you is that, we are in this social media world that we're all in, and we sort of have to be in, maybe begrudgingly in some cases, right? But it's how things are done now, right? If you have a company or you want to market anything, you've got to be on social media, but it's hard to constantly produce content, and it's hard to get excited about it, and often you have. Or not often, but sometimes you have negative interactions with people. But one of the ways that we've tried to incorporate play into our workday is that we film a couple days a week, and we have this thing called One Bad Idea a Week. And it's where we film a totally ridiculous video. And we're not selling anything. We're not probably helping anyone get better or feel better. We're not helping them with their mobility or their pain. We're not teaching them anything. We just are literally making this video for ourselves because it's playful. It's fun to do with our staff. We laugh. We, imitate 80s video. I mean, it's just this really fun way to incorporate play into our workday.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important for people listening to this that, again, our context is always play, like you have to go out and take up a sport. But there's so many other ways to include play in your life that aren't actually physical, that don't involve a physical activity. And, for us, that's one of the things is we're always trying to figure out, okay, how do we incorporate play in our place of work? Because you're right. I mean, in the end, like we want to make sure that the people who we work with are fun. We want to laugh at the office. We want to make sure it's playful. And that's just one way we add that into our life is one bad idea a week.
Yeah. And sometimes those quote bad ideas turn into good ideas.
I mean,
because I'm sure that I've seen some of those videos that are like, what were they thinking? This is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. And we sometimes really age ourselves because we think something is so hilarious, and we just did this like Californian skit. We imitated the Saturday Night Live Californian skit, and you could see that
Stuart.
Yeah. What are you doing here? That thing. We thought
go down the 101 to the 405.
Yes. We just, I'm going to show you it after this, but we just did that. And I would say that maybe, anyone under 40 didn't really get it. Maybe under 35 didn't really get it. But it was fine because again, it's our way of adding play into our workday.
Those that do get
fun.
It's for them.
Yes. And I believe adding play into our workday has this secret health benefit because I really believe that a playful spirit is going to be a spirit that lives long. And there's going to be no scientific study that probably can ever come out to prove that right. But I really believe that it's important to play and not be so serious all the time.
Shout out to the Joker.
Seriously.
Shout out to the Joker. Why
Seriously.
so serious?
Why so serious?
All right. You mentioned the pace of walking earlier, and funny enough, I remember this. There's obviously it's a big part of our culture now, high intensity interval training. But one of the premier studies on HIIT was actually done with intermittent walking, right? Changing your pace of walking, right? And I'm a big fan of even making your walk creative, right? So maybe you're walking and then you find something to balance on your walk, or maybe you find a stick or something, that you could just start playing with, swinging around, whatever. Just like you could turn your walk into an adventure. And the funny thing is, like, even in my neighborhood, I end up finding a whole house that I've walked past,
but you've never noticed
50 times. And I just like, I might be walking with my son or something. Like, have you noticed this house before? He's like, nah, like, where was this house at? Because again, we might have been every time you walk down that block looking at the other house on the other side, right?
Right.
And so you miss this little gem of like, experience,
Yeah. Well, we actually talk about that in Built to Move. I mean, I can't even remember what we call it. I don't know if it's upgraded walking, but we first of all encourage people to maybe sometimes take a walk without your headphones. Although I walk with my headphones, and again, I'm all about walking in any way that's great. But yeah, I mean, we suggest that, people practice nose only breathing while they're walking, or even breath holds while they're walking. Walk on uneven surfaces. We've recommended for years the idea of going for a barefoot walk on Saturdays. And, this really tweaks people because they're worried about safety and going outside. But talk about, one of the best ways to build strong feet is to just spend time barefoot and spend time barefoot walking on uneven surfaces. So obviously only do this if you can do it in a safe place. But we have this little 600-meter loop right by our house. And, once or twice a week, we just take our shoes off and we just walk around that 600-meter loop without our shoes on. And there's just a lot of different ways you can, think about and approach walking and make walking more fun and interesting and get some additional input. I love to practice breathing while I'm walking. I really do believe in the power of breath, but in terms of my life, a breath practice seems to be one of those things that I cross off the list if I have a busy day. It's like in my list of the, 7 health practices I'm going to do every day. That's probably going to be the last, but not if I do it while I'm walking. I really focus on nose breathing or, I'll even box breathe if I feel stressed. But that's one of the places where I layer in a breathing practice because I'm always going to be walking anyway. So there's so many ways that you can sort of upgrade your walking to make it more interesting and more fun and more playful.
Love it. Love it. All right. There's something you mentioned earlier, and I want to ask you more about it. You mentioned putting a ball, right? So a lacrosse ball, for example, into our tissues. Why on earth would we want to do that? Let's talk about that.
Well, I mean, our body is covered in this layer of fascia. And here's how I know that it's gone mainstream. The only people talking about fascia were Jill Miller, who you've had on this podcast many times, and also my husband, Kelly Starrett, starting in 2011. But there was just an article in the New York Times about, the miracle that is fascia. And I thought, okay, if it's in the New York Times now, like it's become mainstream, like fascia is no longer just this niche thing that Jill Miller and Kelly Starrett talk about.
Fascia is fashionable.
Fascia is fashionable because it showed up in the New York Times. But what we love about the lacrosse ball is, first of all, it's $2.99 at your local Big Five or wherever you can get mobility. You do not need to go spend $150 on the latest, greatest fancy mobility tools. But it's amazing just putting a little input into your body, into your muscles and your tissues and your fascia. It's amazing how much better you can make yourself feel, whether that's from a pain standpoint or just a stiffness standpoint. And the other thing we love about it is it can be really choose your own adventure. Once you get some sort of basic tactics and you learn how to do some of the basic things, like, one of the things we teach people to do who are just new to a mobility practice is what we call contract and relax. So you put the ball into a stiff place on your body. You contract on the ball for 4 seconds, hold your breath, and then you exhale, and you find that you can actually, get some room and start to move past the discomfort or pain you might feel wherever that ball is. And so there's contract, relax. There's different ways that you can scrub the ball on your tissues. We have all sorts of tools and tactics for using a lacrosse ball. But I think there is so much we can do to take control of how our body feels. And we found that the lacrosse ball is one of the most useful tools and accessible to pretty much anyone, and that you can just put in different parts of your body that feel stiff or painful and just start to make change. You can really make it. And what we love about it is our whole mission from the very beginning is to empower people to take care of their own body. I mean, when Kelly's book Supple Leopard came out, it was all about him saying, wait a second, like being able to take care of your body is like a right. And it shouldn't be left for, practitioners like PTs and chiros and physicians. And of course, there's times and places for all those people. We all use them and we're fans. But so much of making our body feel better can be done with a lacrosse ball sitting on our living room floor while we're watching the Rings of Power.
I love it. I love it so much. It's so awesome. And of course, I have the balls right by the couch as well.
Yeah, you've got to make it easy for yourself. You've got to make it easy. If it's not sitting right there, you're not going to do it.
I've got a roller right there as well.
Yep.
That's another way we can get pressure on parts.
pressure on parts, and people are surprised to learn that it really makes a difference. We actually just put out this thing called a foam rolling protocol on our website, which anyone can go get. It's free. And the reason I'm mentioning
website?
It's thereadystate.com. And I can give you guys the exact link to the foam rolling protocol, but we put it out there because what we realized is that, and saw, was we would go to the gym and we would see a lot of people just putting it, like the classic scenario you see with the foam rollers, people put it on their calf and they just kind of go up and down. And we are of the mind that there's some tech, and then often those people abandon it because they're like, well, that didn't really work for me. And what we realized, and you'd be shocked that we just realized this because, we've been in this business for a while. We realized that we employ and use some pretty simple techniques to make foam rolling really work. And often they're the opposite. One of the things that people often do is, if your calf, people often just roll up and down on their calf, right? But often a more effective way is to roll side to side on your calf, and that you're actually going to make a bigger difference. We call that scrubbing. So you can scrub your calf on a foam roller and then really start to feel a difference. So there is some technique involved. And so we finally just decided, hey, let's just throw this thing out into the universe, this foam rolling protocol. It's 4 videos. It would take anybody watching, 20 minutes to just get a little bit of technique involved. So, I know a lot of people listening to this are like us. They have a foam roller and a couple balls sitting on their living room floor. And there's just a lot you can do to feel less stiff, to help yourself get out of some nagging pain and injury, and just feel like you can move more freely by just spending 10 minutes working on some tissues.
Yeah. And that's the big thing that the gift that I have of having you in my life. And even for us virtually, even before we met, just being able to get these little insights, like, massaging sideways instead of, front and back. And it's just like, oh, like, that's so obvious. Why didn't I think of that?
Right. Once you start doing it, you really know, you're like, oh, actually, I can really feel this is making a difference. And wow, I actually notice my calf feels less stiff now, and then because we're humans, it's like, we had Michael Easter on our podcast talking about the scarcity brain, right? And it's like, the way that our brains work, it's like almost like gambling, right? If you go up and down on the roller and you don't do anything, you're just going to throw the roller in the trash. But if you get a little bit of positive input, if you get a little bit of money in gambling, you're just going to keep doing it. And it's the same with this input into the body. The other thing that I would love to tell people about is this idea of working upstream and downstream of your main joints. To me, this has been one of the most important and simple things that anybody can do, is that if you have pain in any area of your body, what you want to think about is maybe not working on that spot with a lacrosse ball or a foam roller, but actually working upstream and downstream. So if you have knee pain, for example, it could be that your quads are so stiff that they're pulling on your knee, and that's why you have knee pain. Or it could be that your calves or your shin are super stiff and they're pulling on your knee in that direction. Same goes with your ankle. You can work on your foot and toes and your calf. Same goes for your hip, right? If you have hip pain or hip stiffness, chances are your quads and hamstrings are tight. Chances are your low back is stiff. Chances are your core is stiff. So I think it works for any part of the body, and you don't need to go see somebody to learn how to do this. If you've got those basic tools in your house and you think to yourself, hey, my knee's feeling a little stiff or my knee feels a little tweak, what I want people to do is think, oh, okay, my first order of business before I call my chiropractor or my physical therapist or my physician is, hey, why don't I put a little bit of input in my body upstream and downstream of the tissue that's bothering me and just see if I can make some change. Because man, those are the patients we love to get in our clinic. We do get these people in our clinic that come in and they say, okay, guys, so my knee's been bothering me and I thought maybe it was my tight hamstring. So I did some hamstring lockouts and I foam rolled my quads and I did the couch stretch and then I did this and, I worked on my shins and I still can't quite get relief. And so that's why I'm in here to see you. Like, ideal patient to pay us a lot of money to come in, right? Yeah. This is someone who said, hey, they obviously feel empowered to take a crack at working on their own bodies, which is what we're trying to help people do, is say, hey, being in pain and having nagging pain and injury is like totally normal. It's part of the human condition. It doesn't mean something's wrong. And it actually often doesn't mean you're injured. It just could mean that, you moved in a strange way. And it also means that you can do a lot to make your own body feel better. on your living room floor. And I mean, honestly, if you sort of break down what our mission has been as humans since the very beginning, is to empower people to do just that, just to take care of their own bodies so that you're not always walking around in pain and confused about why your knee hurts or your shoulder hurts, and realizing that you really can make a difference with some simple tools and tactics.
And what greater gift is that?
That's
because
the goal.
we live in these bodies. Everybody listening, you live in your body 24/7. So having a little bit of expertise on you is going to be helpful in all levels of your life. And so speaking of inputs, the inputs from you today have been phenomenal. All right. I'm so grateful for this conversation. And you mentioned the foam roller protocol.
Yeah.
So we're going to put that for everybody in the show notes to make sure everybody gets access to that. But is there anything else that you can share as far as resources? Obviously, on social media, your social media, I love it. I just love it. So can you share social media and anywhere else that people can get connected to you and your work?
Sure. So if anyone's interested in our book, you can go to builttomove.com. But on social media, we are at The Ready State. And I am at Juliet Starrett. Those are and we spend most of our time on Instagram. So if you really want to follow us, in the place where we spend most of our time, Instagram is the place. And that's where to see what's going on. We also have a newsletter that we're really proud of called The Ambush that we put out every Friday. And it's free. And it's called The Ambush. And I'll send you a link where you can sign up for that, but it's the Ready State /Ambush, I think. And it's just where Kelly and I try to share interesting research that we're coming up and that's coming across our eyes that we found. We love to talk about books we're reading, TV shows we're watching, places we're going, things we're excited about. So it's just, it's the place where Kelly and I sort of endeavor to share everything that's going on in our minds that we're excited about. So that would be the other place I'd send people.
Awesome. And of course, you got some massive best-selling books as well. You mentioned Becoming a Supple Leopard, which I've been to several physical therapist offices and I've seen that book in multiple physical therapy offices across the country, just going to see friends. And, sometimes, if I'm going to get some stuff done. And also, of course, Built to Move is the most recent book. And this is the one that is literally, except I brought it in here today because you're coming in, but I took it from the arm of my couch, which is where it's always sitting. It's just
so grateful.
It's that friendly reminder. And also, again, there's those little resources in there that I might have forgotten about. Like, let me just pick this book up and give it a quick, because this book is one of those things that makes every part of your life better, right? So you guys are amazing. You're amazing. This was just awesome. I appreciate you.
Yeah. And I just want to say thank you so much for having me on. And you have just been this rad, consistent, amazing voice in our space for so long, and also giving voice to so many people in the space for so long. And I am such a fan, so grateful for your work. Keep it up. Like, we're all here for it.
Let's go. I received that. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Juliet Starrett, everybody. Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here.
We're not really trained to hear movement hunger signals. We know hunger signals, but movement hunger, we don't use that language. I want more people to realize that they are in a relationship with their body and it's communicating with you, and the skill set, just like all relationships, is to learn how to hear what it's saying a little bit better.